Evening, everyone. I'm going to be over the next week or so experimenting with different things with the sound. We should have sound, but I am also changing things around with what happened. What I've sort of noticed. In fact, Em's just mentioned me on the Labour social there, which I'll be doing Tuesday and Thursday next week. And listening back to it's like, oh yeah, the sound's really terrible in here, and it's because my pop filter broke a while ago, and I completely forgot that couldn't forget that it's broken because it's not there anymore. So I'm trying things to try and damp down the echo in here. So we'll see how it goes anyway, but hopefully I've sent off for some more things. I've got a thing. It probably works a bit better, but not brilliantly, so I'll keep trying. But anyway, I thought I'd start off. We've got some comments already, and I'll hit those as well. I'll go back up and hit those. But I thought I'd start with there's lots of weird news come out today, but one of which is because we're getting ready for the local elections, and one of the most hilarious ones was this one up here. The Conservatives, so we're just under 3 weeks away from the local elections, right? And obviously the Conservatives would like to try and capitalise on the fact that voters are starting to see Rishi Sunak as a little bit more sensible, and they're thinking, we might get a few here. And so they've rushed out this campaign advert, really, and one of them says that this is a Conservative council. It says Moss Side and Midge Hall. I'm not sure that. See, I knew a Moss Side in Manchester. I don't think this would be Manchester, so I think it must be somewhere else. But I haven't really checked, I'm afraid. Oh, does it say there? South Ribble. I don't know. Anyway, but it says in there they've taken the council from debt-free to debt-ridden. And you think to yourself, well, on the one hand, proofreading is king. I don't think they intended to say that. But of course, Labour was straight on it saying, well, given that the Tories have doubled the national debt while they've been in power, it's I think it's something like it's refreshing, or it's great for them to finally admit it. And your area is South Ribble, is it? Right? Have you seen this? Is this in a local? It looks like it's in a local paper or something. Or whether it was just pushed through the door. But yeah, what a thing to boast about. We were debt free and we piled on all the debt. Vote for us again. I strongly suspect they meant it the other way around. But again, the Conservatives are just in disarray over these local elections. I mean, first of all, you've got this. Campaign literature. I mean, I know there'll be times when I haven't proofread something and a thumbnail goes out with a typo on it, but campaign literature, there's lots of people working on it as well. Like, you don't always spot your own mistakes, but you'll spot someone else as quick as a flash. And then there's this other guy, Robert Largan here. Now, I don't know whether this is even this year because I haven't checked. The problem is there's a lot of talk of Conservative MPs hiding the fact that they're Conservatives from their bios and ahead of the local elections. And they did this last year, and some of the examples of people sort of showing campaign leaflets that are hiding their Conservative connections were actually from last year, but there is some of it going on this year as well. And here's I think this could be. I should have actually checked before I put it on, but I only just saw it. But again, in a Tesco, meeting people, advertising his, saying, I'm your MP, is there anything you want to bring up? And on this thing, no hint of him being a Conservative. First of all, the primary colour on his little banner thing is green, not blue. But when you my head's going to keep getting in the way. But when you read through it, let me get my, oh no, that's the wrong thing. But when you read through it, it's like, it gives the constituency office and it gives the address, but it doesn't say Conservative Party or anything like that. There's no hint of Conservative. There's all these various ways to contact him. None of them give any clue that he's a Conservative. And you think, why would that be? Why would that be? Because surely he's there in Tesco making himself available to the public. I'm here for you. By the way, I'm your Conservative MP. Why wouldn't you do that? Unless, of course, being a Conservative is about as popular as a fart in a broken lift. On Radio 4, any questions last night? Lord David Willits said he tried asking the government in the Lords to allow young people to vote using student ID, but the government turned down his idea. Of course they did. Of course they did. Because they don't want people from groups more likely to vote for Labour voting. I mean, the voter ID thing is pure voter suppression. You know, there are, as I say, there are people in other countries go, well, we use ID, we turn ID, but you have ID. The government makes sure you have it. And it's all right, some people saying, yes, but you can get the ID, there is a process. There's loads of people don't even know they need ID. Do you know what they're having to do for these local elections? I was seeing it in the news today, I think, actually. They're having to put on extra staff at all polling stations, right? So here's the normal process. When I go along to vote, this is my normal process. I go to the polling station, I go inside, I give them my name and address, they give me the ballot box, I go, ballot paper, folded up, I go to the thing, put a pencil mark in it, fold it back up, put it in the box, done. Right? So now, and you may think to yourself, oh, well, Phil, now the process is you go along, you do the same things, you show them your driving license, and they say, here's your ballot paper, now off you go. No, there's an extra thing now. They're putting on extra staff. Before you go anywhere near the actual polling station proper, there's going to be people head you off and say to you, have you got your ID with you? And that is to stop it there being a confrontation at the actual person who's got the ballot papers, right? Fine, fair enough. It's not their fault. But nonetheless, that is a frank admission that they know that a lot of people are not aware they're going to need this photo ID. They know that there's going to be people turn up and be, where's your ID? What are you on about? What are you talking about? What ID? There'll be a lot of people. There's 2 million eligible voters estimated, I think, by the government that do not have appropriate ID. And if you're elderly, you know, because what will happen is they'll go there, have you got your ID? What do you mean? Well, you need ID to vote now. Do we? What the bloody hell did that happen? Oh, just now. Right. Well, what ID do I need? So they'll go through a list with you. So obviously they're doing all this so that the people who've got their ID can just go straight through. Fine. So they'll go through the list. If you're elderly, you'll go, oh, I've got one of those, no problem. And you may go back home and get it and come back. You may not, because they found in trials a lot of people, if they don't have it when they turn up, just won't come back at all. But let's say they do. But if you're young, you'll go down this list. Well, I haven't got that. I haven't got a driving license. I haven't got a passport. I haven't got this thing that the government have just announced to be able to do it. So you go down the list. It's a very short list if you're young. In England, that is. There are other options in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. But in England, it's a very short list if you're young. And they'll go through it and they go, I haven't got any of those. Well, you can't vote then. So that's a person eligible to vote who's going to be told on the day they cannot vote. Absolute madness. If the government wanted to make this security argument, and bear in mind, zero people were found to have committed any voter fraud last year, for example. In a big election year, you get something like 6 or 7 most, right? And it's across the whole country. And if the government were really insistent on this security thing, they would make sure everyone had one. Because like I keep saying, the government are insistent that everyone has a national security number. How do they make sure you've got one? Before your 16th birthday, you will be sent it, because they make sure you've got it. If they wanted to make sure you had ID, photo ID, the government would ensure that everyone gets it. But no. But anyway. It was on Lankslide. So it is the Moss Side, Manchester then. When has that gone? The Moss, when I was in, I know, many years ago since I lived in Manchester, but the Moss Side in Manchester would never have been Tory. Wasn't even safe to walk through Moss Side when I was there. Things have changed. Things have changed. Anyway. Right, let's have a look. If being a Tory MP is about as popular as a Trump in a broken lift, then surely they ought not to be an MP, but at least more honest than lying by omission. Well, they like the money, don't they? They like the money and the power. Obviously, they're going to have to present themselves as the Conservative candidate at the general election, but they're sort of hoping that by then Rishi Sunak will have restored their reputation. You can't see your Nana being at all compliant with the ID thing. Unfortunately, she's got dementia. Well, I mean, but that's what's going to happen. We're now going to be filtered. They're going to say, have you got your ID? So I can get my driving license straight out. And I won't, I always go out with my wallet, and my driving license is in my wallet. So it's all fine for me. But there'll be other people who are going, what are you on about? There will be people going, what are you on about? Because obviously if there's 2 million people who don't, and bear in mind, some people may have the ID but still don't realise they need it to vote. But if there's 2 million people who don't have it, now yes, a fair number of those may well be people who don't intend to vote. So we'll just have to see what happens. If it ends up being a lot of people, they ought to take down notes. They ought to make a record of everyone who turns up and has had to be turned away. If it ends up being a lot, then inevitably someone's going to try and bring a court case, aren't they? Finland, you need ID, and if you don't have any, you can get temporary from a police station. Well, there is a process here. You just have to know in advance you need it. But the government should make sure that everyone had that ID. They should have made absolutely certain. You know, even if it meant going as far as writing to every single household and basically saying, you know, with on the envelope, important if you want to vote, and in that letter saying you are going to need these things. I mean, we've had it written on the back of the ballot cards, but mostly ballot cards can go straight in the bin because you don't need them. A ballot card is just like a reminder that there's an election coming up. You don't even need the ballot card. So most people don't do anything, they just throw them away. You have an NHS number from birth. Yeah, to be fair, you don't always know it. You should do, but you don't always know that. But the government will make sure anything that you need, they will make sure you have. The fact that they've not made sure people have this ID, voter ID, means that they're not bothered about people having it. Does a November 2024, it may be October, I think October's probably more likely, October, November, help the Tories? Their ideology doesn't allow them to pursue policies that will help the general population. So what can they offer apart from more misery? They're hoping the economy will be in better shape, ultimately. They are hoping the economy will be in better shape. I'll go back to the top because there were some things I missed at the beginning, then we'll catch up again. So Brad, they're saying your Brexit tourism loss video came out just a bit too early to catch the news. The Orient Express is no longer going to include London. Yeah, there's a few train services being cut out. There's some Eurostar stuff going, isn't there? Is it like Disneyland Paris or something? That's going. But yeah, I saw the Orient Express thing. The thing is, though, the average Brexiteer is not going to care about that, are they? They probably don't even know what it is apart from Poirot. But yeah, I mean, it just keeps coming and coming. Thoughts on Sunak being more personally popular than Starmer with undecided voters? It's sort of inevitable in a way because we've known this for a while, and I've sort of mentioned it in the past. Most undecided voters are Conservative voters. So, you know, for quite a few months now, Labour have sort of presented themselves as a credible government now. And so a lot of people have probably already decided, not absolutely everyone, but a lot of people have. And I've said in the past, a lot of the don't knows, a lot of the undecided voters, the people who will vote but won't say who for, are ones who sort of want to vote for the Conservatives but couldn't bring themselves to say they would with Boris Johnson or Liz Truss, and now more of them are looking at Rishi Sunak and going, yeah, I think I can now say I will vote for the Conservative Party again. So this was expected. I mean, I'd said as much a long time ago. It was clear from polling that the bulk of the don't knows were Conservative voters, people who sort of wanted to vote Conservative but couldn't bring themselves to do so. Because the people who were like that for Labour in the last election have largely now come around. But, you know, that's so that's why you would have always expected to narrow. And you were never going to get these massive poll leads carrying all the way through. Remember, the massive poll lead was built up like Liz Truss. Labour had a roughly 10-point lead with Boris Johnson. And that, you know, if they could have carried that, that would be fine. And it's still above that now. I mean, depending on which polls do you look at, it's quite a bit above it. But it is still above that. And it will narrow a bit further, I suspect. But it may not be doing so now. People like think, oh, it's narrowing now. Polls go up and down all the time. The narrowing, if it happens at all, will happen slowly. You know, it may well be, because a lot of the polls we've had out recently have actually, the field work was before the Labour attack ads. Now, as much as I don't like the first two of them, they have worked from a strategic point of view. And the only poll that I have seen come out where the field work was carried out since those ads actually had Labour gain and the Conservatives lose. Now, it's not, this is Omniscience, it's not one of the ones I rate. I'd quite like to see YouGov's next poll. YouGov did bring out a poll a couple of days ago, but the field work was before the attack ads, right? So I'd like to see the next one before we really know where we are. But we may well find that the next round of polls has Labour going, because again, you know, down and up, down and up, down and up. So I think the Tories are probably getting a bit excited about nothing at the moment. Also glad to see me on Labour Social, though I missed that videos live. Well, they're it's a bit of a graveyard slot. It's 9:30 in the morning. A lot of people won't be able to make that. That's just unfortunate, but I don't make the time. Labour's business secretary claims the next Labour will be the most interventionist in modern times. Do I think this could be the beginning of a new post-Thatcherism era? I think that would be the intention. Now, I'll tell you what's interesting. So there's a lot of people, some of them have got, you know, their own motivations for saying so, but many people quite honestly will not be aware. Labour have got absolutely huge reform plans, massive. So, and there's two major documents that are well worth reading. The first one is Gordon Brown's paper, of course. Now, bear in mind, Labour and Keir Starmer commissioned this paper from Gordon Brown. It doesn't mean they will adopt it all as formal policy. And in fact, Gordon Brown's paper, which includes the bit that Keir Starmer's very keen on, reform of the House of Lords, getting rid of the unelected Lords. I mean, that's big reform in itself, and it won't be easy. It includes a lot of other things as well. There's no way you can do it in the first Parliament. Excuse me, the first Parliament. It's absolutely massive. But it was commissioned by Labour. Labour haven't adopted all of those policies formally yet, apart from reforming the Lords. But there is another policy document out, which was not just commissioned by Labour, but put out by Labour. And it talks about completely restructuring the way government decisions are made. Now, let me give you a little example of one of the drawbacks with the way that decisions are made now. Apart from the fact that the entire government operation is in London, which gives it a very London-centric focus. You know, for example, there's people in Wales and particularly Scotland who often think that the Westminster government, whoever it is, has a very English-centric focus. And it's not quite true, because I have to say, from someone who's from further north in England, it doesn't feel like they're addressing, you know, my community either. What it is very London-centric, because everyone who's making the decision is in London. So obviously there are plans to remove a lot of the power from London and spread it out elsewhere. But there's more than that. So if you think about, so let's say the government identifies an issue, right? There's something that needs to be done, a project. It might be a long project, 10, 15 years, something like that. So you have this thing that you need to do. It's a pressing national issue. The procedure is to identify which government department needs to take ownership of it, right? So you decide which government department needs to take ownership, whether it's because there needs to be a Secretary of State overseeing it. It's important, right? It's a big project. So does it go to the Department for Health and Social Care, the Department for Education, the Home Office, the Foreign Office, you know, the Department for Industry or whatever? Now, what if this project that you need to drive forward, what if it needs the cooperation of multiple government departments? You can give it to one government department so that a particular Secretary of State has oversight over it. But if that Secretary of State also needs the cooperation of other government departments, and it's like, yeah, they're all colleagues, they're on each other's side, but the other Secretaries of State have got their own foci, their own priorities as well. So you often get situations where if a particular government project doesn't fit neatly within a particular government department, it doesn't get done, because there's no one to drive it. What you actually need is a Secretary of State who can sit on top of these other government departments and get what they need to drive that project forward. So that's another one of their plans. You know, when you actually read through some of the stuff, it's hugely revolutionary. Now, again, I will always caution, and I wish I could have persuaded more Jeremy Corbyn fans of this. There is a difference between a political leader having the ideas that you might think are good and them being able to carry them out, even if they've got the power. A lot of what Starmer's talking about is going to really shake things up. And yes, he's got a proven track record of reforming things. You know, he's reformed the Crown Prosecution Service, he's reformed the Labour Party. So he has, but this is a big project, and he's going to need a lot of his MPs on side. And he's going to need the civil service to be able to carry it out. So it's big stuff. But you can look at it and think, so whenever people sort of say, oh, where's Labour's vision, where's Starmer's vision, it's like, on the one hand, well, this is like the biggest vision there's been, never mind since Thatcher, since Clement Attlee's Labour. This is the biggest shake-up in anything. You know, all Margaret Thatcher did was go around the country smashing things with a hammer. Really, that's all she did. I mean, this is completely changing the system. And it's... but at the same time, I don't criticise people for saying, where's the vision? Because this is not something you can communicate to the general public, because it's complicated. It's not a simple thing like leave the EU or something. You know, it's, you know, how do you explain something like this to voters? You don't, do you? The media would never give you the bandwidth. You've got no chance. So they have to focus on like smaller policies, don't they? But anyway, you could walk around Moss Side all day and never see a police officer. When a car did attend, one officer had to remain inside to stop others nicking it. That sounds more like the Moss Side I remember. Although, to be fair, there's plenty of places you can walk around all day and never see a police officer. Maybe in cities, you might, in like London or something. If I was to go walk about here, I would never see a police officer. You occasionally see a patrol car, like very occasionally. I've never seen a police officer walking, unless it's out of their car to someone's house. To have a little word with them. Rishi is not normal. He's trying to save his own legacy from the stuff Boris threw at him. I don't know. Maybe he is. I really don't know. Again, I keep saying I don't know why he wants to become Prime Minister. Was it to become the first non-white Prime Minister? History books done. Was it just to, equally plausible, was it just to make a crap load of money for his wife's business interests? You know, was he in politics only to make sure that his wife's business interests were looked after, which will probably make them tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of pounds? You know, it could easily have been that. I don't think there's any good reason he's gone into politics, so I don't really think he cares about Johnson's legacy. I don't think he necessarily cares whether he wins the next election. I'm sure he's a competitive man. I'm sure he's trying to win the next election, but I don't think he necessarily cares that much, as long as he can get whatever he's wanted out of it. If he just wanted his page in the history books, he's sort of already got it. He just has to not go. He just has to not do anything really stupid, and it's safe enough. But there we go. A new Labour ad just out, subject council tax, is it? Let me have a look. I know they have been pushing their council tax policy a bit. Obviously, local elections quite important. Oh yeah, yes they have. Do you think your council tax should be 15% higher? Rishi Sunak does. Yeah, they have. See, these ones I'm fine with. They're fine. In fact, in terms of the ads, most of them were fine. Well, now I can say most of them were fine. Where are they? These were the first 4. So the first 2 were the ones that were not right. Again, strategically they've worked. They have worked strategically, but they're not right. The second 2 were absolutely fine, and this last one's absolutely fine as well. No problem at all with those. But anyway, if you can't admit that you would vote Tory, then it's a sign you're making the wrong decision. You should be able to stand tall and proud of your vote. No, I don't mean that people didn't want to remember. Most of these, apart from Ipsos Mori, that's the only one where you do it face to face. Most of them you do it online. Most polls you do it online, so there's no shame in it. You say what you feel. What I mean is there are don't know voters, there are undecided voters who sort of want to vote Conservative. They're putting don't know, not because they don't want to say to a person they'd vote Conservative, but because in their own mind they're thinking, if there was a general election tomorrow, I might not vote at all. Because these were people who were thinking, I'm Conservative, but I won't vote for Boris Johnson. Or I'm Conservative, but I won't vote for Liz Truss. And for a little while, I'm Conservative, but I won't vote for Rishi Sunak. Whereas now some of them are starting to think, actually, maybe Rishi Sunak is a decent Conservative leader after all. So the capacity to convert don't knows is much greater for Rishi Sunak than Keir Starmer. At the same time, there are also don't knows who may well go to Labour. The other thing to bear in mind is that you might expect when we really get to the sharp end that tactical voting will come into play. And tactical voting, who's going to vote tactically for the Conservatives? That makes no sense. So really, the main beneficiaries of tactical voting will be Labour, to a lesser extent, the SNP, Lib Dems, Plaid maybe. I don't think the Greens stand to gain any new seats at all, even with tactical voting, really. Blair did renege on proportional representation promise, 1997 manifesto. No, he didn't. You're quoting there, we are committed to a referendum on the voting system for the House of Commons. He did the commission, but not referendum. I'm not sure he got that quote from, but that's not from the manifesto. The manifesto committed to, I can even maybe find it, to a review, which he did. Now, I will grant you the implication, certainly I took the implication to be that, I need a PDF version, don't I? The implication was that proportional representation would come, but it didn't actually say that in the manifesto. Let me see if this is it. Oh, hang on. Have we got this right on? Let me find it. I can't find an actual, must be somewhere. Let me see if this is it. All right. To a referendum. Oh no, hang on. I think you may be right. I may be misremembering this. No, oh, you are right. Yeah, that was naughty. I actually thought all he did was promise a review. I thought I'd checked this. I'm sure this is definitely the 1997 one, isn't it? This is 1997. Well now. Little monkey. But anyway. See, that's now a problem. Because if Labour ever did promise it in the manifesto, people might reasonably say, because obviously the main benefit of promising it in the manifesto for Labour would be getting Liberal, Democrat and Greens to vote tactically for them. But if some people say to them, well, they've promised it before and didn't deliver, that's not helpful. Do I favour introducing universal basic income? If so, how much a month? So It's a complicated question, and obviously I couldn't possibly come up with a number. I think you need to work on the basis that these days we have to accept that full employment is not possible, like real full employment, not just statistical full employment, where every single person is economically active or a pensioner. That is not feasible. So in a situation like that, you have to accept that there needs to be people who are effectively supported by the state to a certain extent. And is it better to just say, look, see, I wouldn't mind at all if the attitude was just, look, everyone can have this universal basic income, it'll cover what you need, but, people who work will get more. It's not a straightforward thing to do, but you do need to have a system like it at least. How much a month it is, I really have no idea, because again, whatever it happens to be, you're going to create some inflation in the system, aren't you? In many ways, it would be better if the state provided more things that people need. So for example, if you think about what you need money for, and this is me going to be going back to my socialist utopia, isn't it? So what do you need money for? Well, accommodation, rent, whatever. Okay, so if instead of having a private housing market, the state built houses, and when everyone came of age and got jobs or became economically active or otherwise independent of their parents, they were given a home suitable to their income and their needs, and it works like a student loan. Like effectively, you would pay something back off it from your income, but if you didn't have an income, well, you don't. But then you also you're not paying anything else, so you don't end up owning it. So the house provided by the state. Other things you need, energy. Well, energy could be provided by the state. You could have a system where energy is nationalised, fully nationalised, and everyone gets a certain amount of energy that they can use and you pay for the extra you use, which means again, someone on low income could effectively, because it's coming from taxes anyway, they could effectively pay nothing for it. There's all sorts of ways in which you can manage a population where that not everyone can be economically active. But unfortunately, it requires a huge injection of socialism. And of course, I can't possibly just throw ideas out the hat because no one's really wrong. Perhaps Labour did the more offensive adverts first to make sure the client media would start putting them in the public domain. Otherwise, they wouldn't have posted the rest. Oh, that's what I mean about it strategically working. I have got absolutely zero. See, I said at the time when I first talked about it, I said, what's happened here? Have they done their homework? Do they know what they're doing? Or is it one of their strategists that's really persuasive and has got Labour to do something a little bit unwise? They've clearly done their homework on it. The strategy now that it's unfolded is clear and it's effective. They have put out they put out an incendiary ad, right? Hugely unfair, hugely incendiary. Why have they done it? To get the right wing outraged. Then the next day, when there's calls for them to sort of apologise and rein back, and the right wing press are sort of waiting with bated breath for them to do that. They're thinking, oh, this is blown up. They're gonna pull it now. No, they come out with the second one that's just as incendiary. So they go, what? The gammons go bright red, and then the next two are fine. And in fact, the next three, because there's another one now, they're all fine. And you're right, yes, if they hadn't done those first two, because if you think about it, the Labour are, ordinarily you would think Labour are going to start to get more mentions in the media anyway as the local elections draw closer, because they have to, the media have to, in fact we'll hear more from the Lib Dems, because the media have to give some attention to the different parties according to their share of the vote, okay? But there's something else happening, isn't there, that's distracting the media? The coronation. The coronation takes place 2 days after the local elections, 1 day after we get the results. So the coronation, the right-wing Tory media are going to be easily distracted by the coronation. And so that will be taking bandwidth away from Labour. So absolutely, I've got zero doubt that they've done this in order to sort of cut through. But you can still sort of say that the first two were still not right. They weren't right to say. And I still say the first one was a bit stupid because it did allow them to basically put Keir Starmer in the same thing and say he's just as guilty, if not more so. So I just thought, you know, if they had to do the second one, whatever, the first one I just thought was still a bit silly. I'm not sure they thought that one through. But anyway, strategically it's worked. Whether that's a good enough reason, we shall see. Do I and others in the southwest and other shires look like we're going to have to rely on voting for the Lib Dems? In other words, should tactical voting be spoke of more? I would. I mean, I saw someone on Twitter today saying that no Labour member should be trying to persuade anyone to vote for anyone other than the Labour candidate. Now, it is a little bit funny because, yes, of course, you should not, as any party member, effectively campaign for a candidate for any other party, dead against any party's rules, really. But at the same time, let's take these local elections. So if there's a particular ward where it's realistically between a Conservative and a Liberal Democrat, right? If the Liberal Democrat wins it, is that good for Labour? Yes, it is. Any Conservative loss in these local elections is good for Labour because the national media are going to look at how many seats did Labour gain compared to how many seats did the Conservatives lose, and they're going to look at how many seats did each of them sort of get overall, the gross total as well as the net. You know, I've said it's really important for Starmer that he comes out of these local elections with Labour winning more seats than the Conservatives. Really important. So obviously that means he needs to win lots of seats that Labour didn't previously have, but he also needs the Conservatives to lose lots of seats. And if some of those seats are lost to non-Labour candidates, well, that works. That works. You know, if it's a three-way thing between Labour, Lib Dem and Conservative, okay, you vote. If you're a Labour supporter, you vote Labour, of course you do. But, you know, a Conservative losing a seat helps Labour. And it's the same in the general election. A Conservative losing a seat helps Labour. You know, it's preferable for Labour to win it if you are a Labour supporter. But the Conservatives... Basically, in the grand scheme of things, you think, okay, let's say Labour have no chance in a particular seat. If you were to rank in order the parties who could take it and include an independent, all of them would come above the Conservatives, even like Reform UK, because Reform UK will cause trouble. It's better for anyone to win that seat than the Conservatives if you are a Labour supporter. So it is one of those funny things. You don't go too much. You don't advocate a particular candidate. I wouldn't, as a Labour Party member, say, oh, you must vote for this particular Lib Dem or Green candidate or something. But, you know, I am going to put out there that the Conservatives losing a seat in any election is always good for Labour. Did the Tories schedule the coronation for after the election? Do you know what? I really don't know. I have no idea, because I don't really pay much attention to the coronation. I am, as people will know, in favour of a constitutional monarchy. That doesn't mean to say I have to like all the things that come with it, because not all the things are essential. But I'm really not in favour of this coronation. Certainly not it being a grand event like this. It didn't need to be. He's already the king. He's already the king. He doesn't need a coronation. I mean, if you have to have a formal event, just knock it out, get it done quickly. There's nothing wrong. You know, if austerity is good enough for the rest of us, it's good enough for the monarchy. Or as other people have said, I know people have said, well, the king should pay for it. To be honest, I don't even know if the king wants it. It might be that he doesn't even want it and that the government have insisted. Really no idea. But, you know, it is a bad look, isn't it? But anyway... But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if the Conservatives made sure that the coronation was going to overshadow the local elections. It would not surprise me at all. What would the process of introducing UBI be? Maybe first for low-income bands and eventually cover all. The problem with this, the risk of welfare trap for edge cases until fully rolled out. There are all sorts of potential traps. What I find is, in theory, these things have been tried as pilots before. But with universal basic income, it's always like a half-arsed attempt. So they never work. Of course they never work because they're never fully integrated. You know, I think it's... I just think it's... there needs to be a properly thought out plan. I think the Welsh government have also had ideas on it as well that they're trying to pursue. Maybe keep an eye on what Wales, because that would be a perfectly good way. I mean, support the Welsh government. Have your, you know, support the Welsh government. Have your trial there. They want to run with it anyway. It's a small enough part of the UK population that you can do it. That's what I would be thinking of. But I really don't know. I couldn't possibly design one myself. Housing crisis, one of the biggest problems facing the UK, is Starmer proposing to build hundreds of thousands of new council houses. I don't know specifically what their plans are other than more social housing. They've not been clear about it. To be clear, it's not an easy thing to do, because although the slowed, in fact almost termination of affordable house building, and especially council house building, has been a political choice, where we are now is there's also a practical choice. Well, it's not really a choice. Like, we don't have enough people who can build houses. We don't have enough materials. My partner, I've said this a few times, my partner works for a large multinational company that produces materials for the construction industry. So they make bricks, tiles, solar panels for roofs, things like that, you know. They are having no problem selling. They cannot actually meet demand. And that's for the current level of construction in this country. So, you know, let's say Labour come in next year. Obviously, they can't do much until the following year in terms of the budget. So let's say you're looking at 2025, March 2025 budget. What can Labour do? It is limited. You know, they will change their priorities in terms of the balance. They will make sure that more affordable housing has to be built. But the capacity to actually quickly catch up on house building isn't there. We don't have the people to build the houses. We don't have the materials to build the houses. So it'll be, if you go back to the last Labour government, some of the stuff they did took years. You know, they didn't solve all the problems in the first Parliament. It wasn't like 4 years afterwards, right, we've fixed everything the Tories broke. You know, it took years. They were still dealing with some things when they eventually lost power. It's a lot easier and quicker to destroy something than it is to build it up again. I'm saying I'm a Republican, not in favour of the coronation, but alas, the rest of my street is, so they'll be partying making jellies. Jellies are nice. Have a jelly. What a ballyhoo. But I like jelly. Is it nice jelly? I don't like blackcurrant jelly. But there's a pretty good chance it'll be strawberry, won't it? Might be strawberry jelly. Or lime jelly. But anyway, the coronation, the last saving grace for the establishment media. Oh, I don't know. I mean, they'd have come up with something, wouldn't they? Last year, they ran for 2 weeks on Starmer's beer and curry, didn't they? They'll have come up with something. But it is easier if they can just if they can just have a moan at Meghan. So they thought they were going to have a moan at Meghan for turning up now, and they thought they were going to have lots of compare Kate with Meghan. So now they can't do that. They'll try still, but they're still going to have a pop at her. But anyway, will Starmer's front bench ignore the Pagan Federation UK like Corbyn's did? I don't even know what that is. As many of us as the Sikh population in this country now, should we not be counted as valid? Maybe. Are there as many as you as there are Jedi, though? I honestly don't know. I really don't know. Is there anything that the pagans particularly need? I mean, are pagans oppressed in some way? But in terms of Labour's policy on house building, I don't think there is a detailed one yet. I would also probably suggest that in the manifesto it will be covered. I'm not sure how detailed it even can be, given that, as I say, there's the actual capacity to meet any grand promise is not there. Couldn't the councils buy up houses, make them into social housing? A lot of council properties are in residential streets. If they had the money. I mean, the only thing on housing I will say is Labour obviously are targeting people who have second homes. Largely, you know, this is a particular problem for small communities in like tourist spots where you can have half the properties empty for most of the year, which is of course crushing for the local economy because that's people not using the local services. So Labour are targeting that sort of thing. So they are going to have, but you know, things like the building, I don't know. I really don't. We will just, I mean, with any policy, we're going to have to wait and see. But on that one, I've not heard anything detailed. Will Labour scrap right to buy like Scotland have? Do you know, I'm not sure. I have in my head, there is... I have seen some right-wing media really panicking about that, which suggests to me that Labour may have said something about it, but I can't specifically recall it. But again, things like that, I think are more likely, we'll find out more likely in the manifesto. There are some policies that are going to be really good for getting the votes in. Remember, when it comes to your manifesto as a political party, there's two types of promise in your manifesto. There's the stuff you want to do because you think it's best for the country. So you put that in. Or best for yourselves if you're a Conservative. And then there's the stuff that you put in because it's going to attract the right voters. Ending right to buy is not going to be one of the things that attracts the right voters. So I doubt they're going to make a big song and dance about it, but it may well be in the manifesto. I do know that there are a few on the right wing that have been expressing alarm at what may happen to it in the next couple of years. The Scottish Government commissioned and released a report on pagan discrimination. The results were disturbing. Really? I didn't know. I've not come across any, I have to say. What are my thoughts on Douglas Ross suggesting people should vote Labour tactically to get rid of the SNP? So a bit earlier when I said that, for example, me as a Labour Party member, I shouldn't be saying, oh, vote for Fred Wilkes, who might be the Liberal Democrat candidate. But I will sort of suggest as a political commentator that it helps Labour whenever the Conservatives lose, right? That's me just speaking as a Labour Party member. That's it. That's my only link to the party. If you happen to be the leader of a political party, you probably shouldn't advise people, even if you'd like to hint at it. Like Keir Starmer and Ed Davey have hinted at it, for example. You know, when they've been asked in the past, you know, is there a pact between Labour and the Lib Dems? They both said, no. But at the same time, it makes sense for us not to waste resources in seats we don't think we're going to win. You know, in other words, making it clear they're not going to be stomping on each other's patch. Apart from one little place in Sheffield where it is between Labour and the Lib Dems. But yeah, if you are the leader of the Scottish Conservative Party, you probably ought not to be telling people to vote Labour. I think he had to rein back on that quite quickly. He is a bit... I'm not really sure how Douglas Ross became Conservative leader. He's not very good, is he? But anyway... The Lib Dem councils in Portsmouth and Eastleigh wish to buy a load of MOD public sector land and build social housing on it. The government have refused without explaining. Landlord interest. No, it's Tory interest. They don't want affordable housing. They don't want social housing. The reason is that their voters by and large have their own homes or will have their own homes. And the thing about selfish homeowners, which are the ones who vote Tory, is they don't want more homes being built, because it does a couple of things. First of all, the construction work is potentially inconvenient, and even if it's not to them, it affects house prices because it puts less pressure on housing in that area. So even if these are purely social housing, it's not for sale, then it's still it reduces pressure on the rental market. And if you can't charge as much rent in an area, then a landlord won't pay as much for the house to rent. So that affects the other house prices as well. So no, it won't. It can just. There can be all sorts of reasons why the Conservatives will block any move to improve social housing, but it can just be as simple as the Conservative Party do not want social housing because their supporters don't want social housing. Blair failed to build any council houses. There haven't been any council houses built for a very long time. A very long time. You can no longer dance naked around bonfires and sacrifice things. Well, I mean, animal rights. You can sacrifice a teddy. I'm pretty sure you can dance naked around a bonfire as long as it's on private property. Do I have anything to say on the recent discovery of the £100,000 camper van parked in the driveway house of Sturgeon's mother-in-law? Is this why she's taken off her wedding ring? Well, what I would say, and again, anything to do with this is incredibly difficult to get accurate information, but what is clear is there was a camper van. It was paid for by the SNP, and it has been, as far as I can tell, parked on Murrell's mother's driveway since 2020. The official SNP story is that this luxury camper van was bought as a COVID secure battle bus. I'm not sure I believe that. And the other question I would have, and I've had nothing to do with political party logistics, I accept. The other thing I would say is, don't the SNP own anywhere that they could park it themselves? Why did it have to be parked? And I accept if people are saying it's been there since the time, they probably haven't. I'm not suggesting it's been used for social reasons. What I would say is, why did the SNP buy this thing? Why did they park it on private property that's not their property? You know, why wouldn't the SNP have it parked on their land and their properties or rental properties, wherever? And given that its stated purpose was to be used for a COVID secure battle bus, why did the SNP then not sell it when this was not going to be the case? So that's what I would say. You say you're not sacrificing your teddy, Phil, that's sick. I don't see why. I had a friend who used to blow them up. It wasn't quite normal, admittedly, but he used to explode them with little, with quite dangerous fireworks. All very safely, sort of. Well, not very safe for the teddy bears. But that's what I would say about that. In terms of this report on Sturgeon removing a wedding ring, I don't even, see, that's the problem with things like, I don't worry about tattletale like that. I don't even know whether that's true or not. A report I saw said that she just had her hand in her pocket, so they couldn't even tell if she'd removed the wedding ring. And that's the problem. The thing is, in Scotland, you've got one part of the media that's pro-Tory and the other part that's pro-SNP, and it's like, well, who do you listen to? You can try and read both and see which ones they agree with, but that's not a great deal at the moment. Labour will gain some Tory seats in Scotland. They won't hit double figures though. Scots have long memories and Labour shot themselves in the foot. Yeah, you say that. People always say things like that. It's never true. Otherwise they wouldn't vote for anyone. At some point or other, every political party's pissed the people of any population off. You know, people basically do understand it's different people. And even if they had a grievance, and I don't know how, even if they had a grievance with a particular party, it was different people in charge of it, they understand that a political party is not like a person. You know, it's a group that has different people in charge, and the group will change its nature. But there we go. On the new channel, what the Labour Social one, aren't I going for semi-official appearance? I don't know what that. Oh, on that one, I mean, that channel obviously is going to be there to support Labour, of course. Whereas this channel, I am a Labour supporter, but this channel does not exist to support Labour. This channel exists to try and discuss politics with people as honestly as I am able to. You know, I'm not interested in, like, for example, it's like when the Conservatives are in power now, so they are my main focus. When Labour are in power, there will be lots of things they do that I approve of, but there will be things they do that I do not approve of as well. Camper vans at £100,000, most obvious means of delivering leaflets. Yeah, I don't think, to be fair, that's what they were trying to say. But it is, I mean, the whole thing with Sturgeon and Hubby is utterly ridiculous. And you just think to yourself, how have they allowed themselves to get into this mess? The damage that this is now going to cause the SNP. You know, I don't like, and I know a lot of the right-wing media is going, oh, the SNP's finished, oh, it's going bankrupt, oh, it's brilliant. But, you know, and I've said from the start, wait 6 months, wait for the dust to settle and see where they are. But the potential for hideous amounts of damage to the SNP here cannot be overstated. And I don't think there's any way at the moment of possibly judging how elections in Scotland might go in next year's Westminster elections, because, you know, this scandal, the SNP will have carried on running by then. And I mean, there's two sides to it from the SNP's point of view. First of all, this scandal has only just started, right? It's only just started. There's scant information out in public at the moment. But what we know so far is you think to yourself, how the hell did that party, because it was more than just one man, how on earth did that party allow all this to happen? And the second thing is, Humza Yousaf himself, are we really going to think that he is the person who's going to be able to steer a steady course out of this? He's not well regarded in terms of basic competence. You know, I think he's got off to an interesting start. I think his engagement with the press has been decent. I think his first press conference, instead of having like the chairs like they do normally, I think he got a load of sofas in and just had like a nice sit down with them, which is probably the way to go. So, you know, he's not completely useless. There's people on the right saying, oh, he's going to, I've seen some people in Labour actually saying, oh, he might be the next Liz Truss, or SNP's version of Liz Truss. I don't think he's going to like implode. But he's not, I mean, he's faced with a massive task here. I'm not sure he's up to it. Why did Blair fail to build council houses to replace the ones sold by Thatcher? Again, I really couldn't say, unless again it was a problem with supply. I don't remember, if I'm honest. The other thing to bear in mind is, like, Tony Blair himself was a centrist. His focus was on public services. It wasn't necessarily on housing. But that's done. Again, when you vote in an election, you can pick on things that weren't done and should have been done, and I will agree. But the bottom line was the Labour government a lot better than the Conservative government? Yes. Were people a lot better off? Yes. And the same will apply. And this is what I mean about, you know, there will be times in the years to come where I'm going to be critical of the Labour government, because there'll be things that they don't do that they should do. But will it be better than the Conservatives? Of course it will, a lot better. And that's what you get to vote for. You don't get to vote for what you want. No one gets to vote. How can you vote for what you want? There's 68 million people in this country. How can you vote for what you want? Because a maximum of one person could get exactly what they want. You vote for which is the best option available to you. It's like going into a restaurant. You don't get to order what you want. You get to order what's on the menu. What's on the menu. except in an election, there's two things on the menu. It looks like you've got more things. Your ballot box has more boxes, but there's two things on the menu. I mean, if you look at the polling, going back to this SNP thing, if you look at the polling at the moment, it would actually, I've actually seen some recent polls for the Holyrood elections. Now, I would dismiss those completely because everything is in flux at the moment. Everything is in flux. We have no idea what's going to. I really would say wait 6 months because everything's mad right now. It's just like when Rishi Sunak took over from Liz Truss, everything was in flux. Completely different situation now. Should I get rid of them? Let's get rid of this. If you look at the latest polls, I mean, if you look at what it was like, obviously there's no guessing for where Liz Truss was. It's when this gap was massive. And when Rishi Sunak took over, the gap was still massive. It came down a bit, but then it, stayed there. So everything was still in flux. Now it's come down a bit more. And the same thing, if Yusuf is getting things right, the same thing will happen. The polls at the moment look pretty catastrophic for the SNP. The polls would suggest that the next Holyrood elections, Labour would indeed win more seats than them. Not a majority, not even as much as the SNP have now. In fact, it would be a really weird. In theory, Labour could form an alliance with the Lib Dems and the Greens, the Scottish Greens, possibly. They'd certainly have common ground. But that doesn't matter. The polls at the moment don't matter because we do not know where we're going to be in 2 years' time. In 6 months' time, things may stabilise a bit. Tony blames himself as a centre. I thought for a brief moment you were going to say Thatcher. Arguable. It's not arguable. I keep trying to say to people, like, there are situations. So if you're very clever and you're politically astute, right? If you were centre left, but let's say you were pretty central but centre left, you could easily join the Conservative Party because that would be a much easier route to political power for you. If you are incredibly clever and let's say centre right, you're never going to join the Labour Party. Why would you? It's a much harder route to power. So this is what I say. Anyone that's in the Labour Party, and okay, like Lee Anderson is, but that's in a council. He just lived in an area where only Labour win. So that's why he went the Labour route. But someone who's got aspirations to get to the top of politics will move, right? They will move. If they want to be a Conservative and they're in a Labour area, they'll move to a Conservative area and they'll ply their trade there. So anyone that is in Labour and is clearly a very effective political operator, they're in Labour because they're Labour. It seems silly to me to say that they're really like a Reds Tory, because that's doesn't make sense. Because why would they not be in the Conservative Party? It'd be easier for them. Tony Blair, if he'd been a Conservative, he would have been a Conservative Prime Minister. No doubt about it. But he wasn't. He wasn't as... He didn't necessarily share all my priorities, but he was certainly centre-left. But he was very close to the centre. He was... The way I would describe his politics is he wasn't actually that bothered about the private sector being involved in public services. I mean, I see it as very inefficient. He didn't. All he wanted was that everyone got access to those public services, regardless of means. And that's the difference between the centre left and someone much further to the left like me. I just see the inefficiency of it. The extra cost for no reason. Labour campaign to Little England, not Scotland. Brexit still huge issue to Scots. That's not true, and Labour cannot do that either. Labour need to win seats in Scotland. They need to have a Scottish focus. Fortunately, there is there's a specific Scottish wing to the Labour Party under Sawa. But Labour understand And again, I know what it looks like if you're from one part of the country and you see a political party, it's like they're focused on the other part, and you think, well, that it's just, they'll look like that. If you lived in some of the areas that you consider Little England, they don't think the Labour Party are particularly trying for them. They'll think they're trying for the Red Wall. If you live in the Red Wall, as I do, then actually you think they're focusing from a different group. It's really because they're trying to catch several. There's like 4 different groups they need. Remember, you know, it's not just about the Red Wall. If Labour win the Red Wall back, big deal. Gordon Brown won the Red Wall. Ed Miliband won the Red Wall. Jeremy Corbyn won it the first time round. They still lost. It does need to target some like conservative area or marginal conservative areas, yes, which you might call your Little England. But even winning those doesn't get him power. You know, he needs some seats in Scotland. He needs quite a few seats in Scotland. You know, no one of these things works. He can't afford to have a very narrow. He can afford to have a narrow focus on a particular type of voter, but not on a particular location in the country. It doesn't work. Really get fed up with all this news, which is nothing more than opinions targeted at Meghan. You'd think she was a serial killer, for heaven's sake. Now she's just a mouthy black woman. Well, that's their issue with her. She's a bit gobby, and she's not Kate. I mean, if Meghan had turned up to that vigil, the Sarah Everard vigil, they'd have crucified her. They didn't when Kate turned up, did they? Oh dear. Right. On balance, my life was always better under Labour, live in a place that had zero input in Westminster and born 1960. It always will be, because and again, I keep trying to say that the difference, if you think about the mainstream parties in Britain, the British mainstream parties, that is the ones who've got the 6 parties who have representation in Westminster. Not counting Northern Ireland, because most of those parties are sectarian. But if you think about the 6 mainstream parties in Britain, 5 of them, not counting the Conservatives, 5 of them all want to govern in the interests of the people. We disagree on what's best, but all 5 parties want to do what's best for people. The Conservatives are alone in deliberately not wanting that. The Conservatives alone, even the relatively good ones, like, you know, the likes of John Major and Michael Heseltine, they still had like a tough love approach, like the idea of throw people in, make them suffer, and they'll, you know, work their way up, you know, like the sink or swim type attitude. And they were the good ones. You know, they don't want the safety net. They don't think people need the safety net. They think it's actually creating weakness to give people a safety net. You know, I remember, and again, we think these days on Brexit issue, Michael Heseltine is one of the most outspoken critics of what the Conservative Party's been doing for the last few years, particularly through the lens of Brexit. And yet Michael Heseltine, when Labour first came to power, Michael Heseltine was arguing very strongly against the introduction of the minimum wage. You know, so Tories were still Tories, and they've always had this attitude. They've never felt that they wanted to govern on behalf of everyone, and that makes them fundamentally different. Like all the other parts, like I disagree with certain aspects of the Lib Dems, the Greens, you know, Plaid, the SNP, of course, but I recognise that all of them want to do what's best. We just have different ideas what it is. But anyway, yes, we've gone well over time. Let's just try and get a few quick ones at the end. I think we may have done, actually. Yeah, I think we've done, actually. Well, thanks very much for coming on anyway. We'll be back on again next Saturday. I will, for those who are like, you know, Labour supporters or Labour friendly, I will be on the Labour Social Tuesday and Thursday morning this next week, I think. I need to try and build in some time because I'm getting a new computer next week as well. So I need to try and get ahead of myself again. But thanks for coming on. Have a good evening, everyone. And until next time, I'll see you later.